Hello, friends. Matt with Eddie's Guitars coming to you from the 2024 Fretboard Summit here with my good friend, Mr. Richard Hoover.
Amen to that.
Santa Cruz Guitar Company. He's going to show us what they brought to the Fretboard Summit today. Richard?
What a pleasure to see you guys. And of course, we'll talk about something we rarely mention guitars in our whole life. Okay? Let's go take a look at them. This handsome little face is a combination of like crazy rare woods, but they're not chosen just because they're rare. They're also really exquisite tone woods and not real traditional. These sides and back had the wrong store stuck on there. Sides and back are Pernambuco. Pernambuco is a super prized wood. It's a premier choice for violin bows or professional or orchestral instrument, and it has been for centuries. So it's really rare. Also, the two-piece back, the piece that's required for that's almost unheard of. We can get a piece big enough for that. And in the same spirit we do all our guitars, we would never have harvested it from a living tree. This actually came from a fence in Brazil. And you go like, why? Well, because it was there. Right? People make stuff out of things that are in their backyard. Yep. And that's actually not to stray too far here, but part of the panache of Adirondack spruce is that's what the companies used to use in the good old days, but it was also in their backyard, right? Sure. So it made sense to do. So another really unusual about this is this beautiful figure in it, which is rare in any wood, but it almost looks alive with that. And the color in it and the depth, which I doubt will show up in the camera, as you turn this, every once in a while you'll catch the depth that makes you jump. Right? It looks like it goes down half of an inch.
Really.
So as a tone wood, it was really to bust a miss. It's the scale of clarity. From a warm, round tone to bright, clear, articulate. And there's not a better or worse. It's what your style of playing fits the best with, and your choice in that. And this would be the more clear, bright, and articulate. Not to be confused with bass versus treble. You can have a bright bass and a muddy treble. So it's not really easy to work with, but we had to. Because it was so cool. So we combined that with not just a redwood top. This comes from Fort Ross, which is an outpost that goes all the way back to about 1800. We're now approaching 200 and something years. And it was a great collective of Hawaiians, Russians, Alaskans, Inuit, and who knows, the bike gang frontiersmen that roamed the Old West and stuff. They got together and built this fort in order to ship beaver pelts and raw materials to all the way to Europe, Japan, and Russia. And this redwood was part of the construction of their chapel. And it caught on fire in the 70s, and it would put out, everything's okay, but this beam had to be replaced. So a big beam in the rafters that would have been living in the 1700s and even before. So let's say the growth rings on this, that's about 100. This tree would have been 1,500 to 2,000 years old. Wow, that's a pretty amazing story, right? And then, of course, we have the natural aging in the chapel of a couple of hundred years. And let me squeeze this little bit of science. One of the reasons that old violins and old guitars sound better, in fact, the biggest reason, is even once a wood's dry and the moisture is out of it, the resonance can still be sticky and inhibit resonance. But they polymerize over time. I wish I could say crystallize, it's sexier, but no, it's like glue drying, polymerization. It gets harder, 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 and the wood's more resonant. So this has everything going for it.
Yeah.
A lot of mythology about redwood as a top, but again, we approach this through science, not opinion. And we use probably the most sophisticated modal analysis of anybody to measure the properties of a piece of wood to find out what it's appropriate for.
Sure.
And that comes from my background in the violin tradition of tapping, twisting, scratching, smelling, anything with a piece of wood to decide out what its properties are, how it was going to be bright or dark, if it's going to be more prone to bass or treble, how quickly it's going to respond, how long it's going to sustain. And really with practice you can determine that, but it's hard to teach and pass on. So we've developed a system where we can measure those properties. And it turns out redwood surprisingly has the widest range of tonal properties from that scale of bright to dark of any woods we work with. So it's not that we choose a piece of redwood, we choose the right piece of redwood for the instruments that we're going to make. That was a mouthful. This overlay and bridge are also out of the Pernambuco. And it was so cool to be able to access this. Now there's one more piece of the information about this that'll be a theme through some of these other guitars, is I've been building 55 years, right? Started when I was 4. Of course, occasionally I come across a piece of wood, I go, oh, I've never seen anything like that. That's too good. I'll save it for later.
Yep.
Well, look at me, it's later. Right. So we really are starting to use that collection of woods I've put aside over the years because it's much more fun to have them in guitars at this point. So both this Fort Ross top and this Pernambuco, actually the Pernambuco was a recent acquisition, but I would have done the same. It's like, ooh, that's too good to use. Right? And this is, the materials are priceless. This is really expensive, but it's not just a novelty of rare woods. It's the best possible sounding guitar that we can make too.
Incredible.
This is another favorite. I grew up in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley, and the towns were surrounded by walnut orchards, but also the highways were lined by the black walnut, the California walnut. And the orchards, they used this dark, hard walnut for the trunk of the tree because it resists bugs and rot and so forth. And the nut-bearing part is grafted onto that. And so the trees along the roadway were all black walnut. Now, most of that went into fence posts and firewood because it seemed plentiful. So today, getting this wood is really difficult. People prize it for veneers. You'll find it in Jaguar and Acura dashboards and gun stocks. And it's awesome tone wood.
Yeah, I love walnut.
Yeah, I would put it in somewhere in the category of mahogany, koa, kind of a midpoint between the super bright clear and the warm. So it makes it real versatile.
Yeah.
And when we combine the back and sides per tone and the top, we could get a recipe for a sound somebody wants. And interestingly, if we have in this case, we have an Adirondack top, which is also clear, clean, articulate, combined with a walnut. The walnut tamed that a little bit, right? It brought it down a bit. You'd think that if you had two different woods there, they'd cancel each other out. But no, it's like cooking. If you had a really sharp, strident, tart thing and you put pineapple juice in it, you get sweet and sour.
Yeah, right.
And it's not, you get a whole different thing out of it.
Right.
So in our custom building, these aren't choices that the guitar player would know to ask for, but we can make those suggestions to get the sound that's right for their style of playing. So anyway, this is dear to my heart. I grew up with this. And It's one of my missions, like it was with mahogany, to get this wood the respect it deserves.
Absolutely.
This is a beautiful fingerboard. It's ebony fingerboard, but it's inlaid with these blocks of snakewood,
Yeah.
which you see repeated in the bindings
Yep.
on this,
Yep.
and the tuning buttons, and this really pretty power shell dots.
Yeah.
And around the edge is little tiny ingrain ivory.
Oh, sure enough. Yeah.
Isn't that
Nice
nice
little
and subtle?
frames.
Yeah, and this is in design. These are the things that combined make it look real expensive and elegant. And you don't, if something's really elegant, it looks more expensive the closer you get
Right.
to it.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
those will pop. This has a little bit of a tint to the lacquer, just to make it look old and warm and blend with
Sure.
everything else. It's not added lacquer. It's just some of the layers are colored to get
Gotcha.
that and that depth. So that's a beauty. And then again, the abalone detail here is power shell, which is farmed in New Zealand, so it's sustainable. Sounds good.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
This is also a real personal accomplishment here. This is the same wood as we saw first. It's redwood. And this came from a real exotic locale, probably about 10 miles up in a higher elevation from our shop.
Yeah.
And it would have tumbled into the river, probably from natural causes, a storm or something. In fact, most assuredly, because the native Californians didn't cut trees. They might use a piece of it, but they didn't like cut trees down and kill them. And then the logging wouldn't have started until really late 1700s, early 1800s.
Yeah.
This was in the water probably for at least 300 years.
Wow.
So you can imagine this tree falling, rolling into the river, getting trapped in these big glacial granite boulders, and until the next big storm. And then it might have rolled down the river another half a mile and got stuck again.
Yeah.
So it took this 300-year journey down from the mountains past our shop to the sea, right? And then, of course, it washes up on the beach. And in the old days, after a big storm, you'd wake up at dawn, there'd be just a cacophony of chainsaws, people on the beach reclaiming the wood. Not anymore. Those kind of things are too dangerous and too fun to be legal. So
Yeah.
it is all this is most of it goes to a landfill. But even though we are super into sustainability and doing the right thing by using reclaimed wood, et cetera, it's the spirit of it is more important than the law sometimes. So no problem working with somebody that knows how to get in there in the dark and haul this off. But it took about 5 years to negotiate the acquisition of this so we could put it into a guitar top.
Wow.
And so that's unusual and a good story in itself, but it's some of the most resonant stuff I've seen in redwood.
Awesome.
It's almost perfect from the beginning. We don't make the tops to a size, we make them to a frequency and some other properties, and this was just a delight to work with. This has a classic sinker color in it. This is from mineral and the water leaching into the grain and oxidizing. It's not a decay, it's just a process that goes on. And this little hints of flame in here are just so pretty. Now, a caveat, don't use flamed redwood on a guitar top. It generally doesn't have the structural integrity longitudinally to support the strings. It'll warp. But in this case, it's so shallow in the grain that we get the look without the degradation.
That's nice.
And I've actually had this in a guitar for about 35 years now.
Yeah.
So I'm confident in it. But I'm just in love with this. I can't get over how cool it looks.
Gorgeous. The Co is a perfect frame for it.
Thank you. It is. I like that too. I like it a lot. This is blackwood,
Yep.
which is again is harvested sustainably. And this is the stuff just really drives me is it's inky black. They make oboes out of it, but then this little sparkle of color in there that we get, and then highlighted by the super warm koa.
Right. Luxurious.
Luxurious. That's a great way to put it. And this sounds wonderful. And this, I like simple and elegant. But again, the closer you look, the more expensive it looks. So from across the room, this guitar looks pretty plain. But as you get closer, the highlights, like the little sparkle here, but that flame koa coming out of this bright. I want this one. I do. And then, here it's like, one of my favorite body sizes is the H model.
Yeah.
Just because it looks like a guitar. It's really super versatile. It is by design. It's is a little predominant in the bass, but not overly predominant like a dreadnought. So you can play lots of different styles on it. Really nice.
What's the top on this one?
Moon spruce, yeah. This is from it's almost like Italian Swiss border near the Fimi Valley, where the heavies got their wood, like the School of Amati, Stradivari, and so forth got their wood. And this comes from the Florinet family, who's been in it for 500 years that they know about.
Wow.
Right? And of course, cutting wood for violin tradition. When I first started out, I had to get an introduction to a violin maker to even talk to these people. Yeah. And the idea that their precious wood would go into a Western guitar was abhorrent, right? So I had to have the right introductions to do it, and also prove that I knew what I was talking about with it. And today, and with our introductions and help, these people are on the internet and they'll sell wood by the set to luthiers to get access to it. But it's moon spruce, which has a lot of folklore in its own about it. But it's a really interesting story. They only cut old growth trees, right? But really selectively. They'll take a tree in an area and leave that alone and go way someplace else to pull the next one down. And I would call that it's a sustainable harvest rather than a reclamation on it. But the idea is these big trees that can be like, over like 12 feet in diameter. Wow. Have like a immense hydraulic action in them. They take water all the way up. Hey, Jim. To the extremities, and please, thank you. That's Jim Olson. Nice. One of the best guitar makers ever.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Legend.
I just visited his shop. It was really inspirational. Cool. Yeah. So the principle behind this is, of course, it takes moisture in, and it flows throughout all the capillary action of the trees. And imagine the tides in the ocean. Most people should know this. When the moon is its most gravitational pull, it pulls the ocean into a hump, and that's when we have our low tide. When it's at its least influence, the ocean flattens out, we have our high tide. And this is the same principle in these massive trees that the strongest gravitation pull of the moon pulls the moisture and loads it towards the top, and at least influence, it settles down to the bottom, right? So they cut the upper portion of the tree that has less moisture, less sticky stuff in it, and the violin makers have prized that for centuries, right? Yeah. So whether you want to debate the physics or not, don't. It's just a cool story, and it is also, they're selecting the highest grade cosmetically of the wood. Sure. So we don't choose wood by cosmetics, but it's nice to have a perfect sounding wood that looks really good. Yeah, sure. So to do that and put the sunburst on it, that's another controversial issue, but I like it. And this is this is a lot.
I love it.
This is a lot, but it's selected from the curly part of the shell. And if you like bling, that's really, really,
sure
really
is.
pretty.
That's a statement.
Yeah, this is, I'm going to spread those out later. This is another spectacular piece of blackwood. And if you can get this without the shine, you can see the figure and the color in that.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful. And if I didn't say this on the last one, the blackwood is it's a bright, clear sound. You know, it's almost like if you pick the wood off the shelf, you can tell by sliding it across what the tone's going to part to the tree. I mean, to the guitar. And I also love this treatment of tortoiseshell on here. Tortoiseshell only has a stigma of a less expensive guitar from Martin's tradition of the 18 with tortoise and the D28 with ivory. But to get it to work, we backlight it with a little tiny white laminate, and that makes it sparkle through here.
That's awesome.
And to me, that's real expensive.
I love
Like the handle of something in an old English library full of leather and green upholstery and brass. That's pretty.
The blackwood almost has like a burl.
It is, yeah. It's really, really cool, and it's subtle, and that's what I love. Those kind of that surprise, you know, that surprise of elegance. Ooh, that looks expensive. I want it. This guitar is an enigma. So, you know, you look at this, you know, this, people consider this a small body, but people consider an OM a small body. The irony is when it was introduced in about late 20s, early 30s, it was called the orchestra model because it was a huge guitar, right? It was the biggest guitar people had ever played, and it was eclipsed pretty quick by the dreadnought like that. So these guitars as small bodies is contextual to our time. Right. This guitar, you go, well, that's a toy, right? No, if you go back a little further, that's the size guitars were. They were, the contexts they were played in is like a room like this, or maybe bigger, but acoustically, and you didn't, you know, the only reason guitars got bigger was to be louder to compete with banjos and barking dogs in vaudeville, right? They didn't get better, they just got louder. So the idea to build an exquisite sounding guitar that was ergonomic and portable, there was a guy that was in the traveling orchestra for a big Broadway play that hey, can you make me a guitar I can travel with, but I can play it as a real guitar when I get there. And so we use the ideas of construction of guitars around late 1800s. And if you look at those guitars, the bracing is like little bird bones in it. And it just can be super surprising sounding. When I took this to, back when magazines were everybody was in one room, in an office, I took this to Guitar Player for a review. And Matt Blackett that did the review, everybody else is in cubicles, and he plays guitar a little bit, and everybody's head pops out. They go, what kind of guitar is that? He says, oh, Richard brought this parlor guitar they made. And the guy said, no, not that guitar, the one you were just playing. So that review was great. He said something like, this isn't the best sounding small body guitar I'd ever played. This is the best guitar I've ever played, period. Awesome. Yeah. So that's not boasting for us. As again, it's another career goal to get people to understand that it's not the quantity, the quality of the construction. The problem we are up against is today, a lot of the bigger companies are doing reproductions, tributes to their guitars of the old days, but they're running through the same processes that a big guitar today would be. So they're overbuilt. Rather than dimensioning the top, back and size proportionally, they're just heavy, right? So the people, to be polite, say they sound mellow, but really don't sound very good at all. And they hear something like this, and it's like, yeah, wow. So this is our purpose is to get a little guitar that's really portable, that's really real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do it. This is plenty cute. And again, this is koa binding again that works so cool with these other warm woods. And this is a European spruce with bear claw on it.
Yeah.
These little squiggles. And
The shell lining.
yeah, and this is the heart of the power. If you measure the animal, the shell's about maybe this big, even smaller, and where the animal attaches to the shell, the nacre, which is what this gets really swirly, and it's got these dark blues and purples in it. So it's really tasteful. And the idea again is don't make it wide and bold. It starts looking like a Eastern European circus cart or something. Is to make it proportionate so you kind of discover it as you approach it.
Right.
So this is a favorite. This is Cocobolo, back and sides, which again, and overlay, which again on this guitar is going to give a more articulate response. So when I say articulate or bright, again, I don't mean treble or shrill. It's that when you, as a player, this would be more desirable for someone that plays maybe a fingerstyle jazz or something, where you want your audience to hear every note you play separately and all the nuance you put into it when you play. As a singer-songwriter, I don't necessarily want you to hear every note I play. And a warmer, rounder sound that is supportive and blended is my preference. So there's no good or bad in these. If we use Sitka spruce, a rare ancient spruce, the European spruce, it's that scale of clarity, really, that people can choose what's best for them. There's not a good or a best in those woods, but there's a best one for you, what you play. That's a pretty good spectrum of stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and do one more here. And I said this earlier, one of my career goals is to get mahogany the respect it deserves. The reason that we have this thing that mahogany, that's in cheaper guitars, right? It actually predates guitars and goes back to furniture and pianos. The mahogany tree, when left alone, grows like a big piece of cake. It's like pound cake, and the limbs start way high up, and it's so workable and beautiful to cut that it used to be plentiful. Every woodworker wanted to work with mahogany because it was a dream to work with. You can color it to look like anything else, and it's super light and stable. Whereas rosewood is problematic. Right? So rosewood went to the real expensive stuff, and mahogany went into the plainer, easier stuff. But on the tonal spectrum, there's no right or wrong. There's not a better or worse. Mahogany can be more towards the middle of that spectrum, making it real versatile for all kinds of playing. You wouldn't be limited by being too dark or too bright. So we do that by making a mahogany top, which is the cheapest guitar people ever made, right, in the Depression. To save money. But people love those guitars, like old Martin 17. Wow. And everybody's usually surprised by that. So these, using the mahogany top in this context, we're also using old growth, which is another wide term. What it means is trees that grew in an undisturbed environment, where they grew in symbiosis with all the other flora and fauna. They grew steady and slow, which means they were really dense and more resonant. And they're prettier, darker color. So that's the kind of wood we want in the top. Not a newer growth tree that the surrounding trees were cut. There's so much sunshine. It grows really fast. It looks like mahogany, but it doesn't have the tone quality. So before I'm done, I'd like people to appreciate that and love mahogany as much as I do. So this is a fun selection, and it's kind of a snapshot of what we do. This is thanks to our good friend Steve at Down Home Music, which is right down the road, brought his guitars for us to display so we could have some instruments here. But it also shows who we are and what we do, we're largely a custom shop, and you know well what that means. We can build a guitar for your taste that you represent to a customer, and you have a variety of things, or we can work with you and your customer to get exactly what
Right,
they want.
right.
And I want to add this last caveat. Nobody knows what to ask for. You know, it's really intimidating if I ask people, you know, what kind of tone do you want? What kind of EQ? People go, oh, you know, get a Taylor, it's easier. So that's by listening to somebody play, what their influences are, what guitars they have, what they like to change. You can figure out what people want in those regards. And if they're asking for particular woods because they heard on the internet that that's the cool thing, wood, you take a piece of wood that has a name, there's enough variety within that kind of wood that usually we can get what someone wants.
Sure.
I was talking about redwood. We'll cover the spectrum from Santa Cruz to a bright clear Adirondack. And also within any wood, there's a lot of variety within that. And because of our 50 years of experience in doing the old-fashioned analysis of that wood, we can nail it. And the only reason we've gone high-tech with that is because I won't be able to be around and do it forever myself.
Sure, sure.
It's really fun. So, yeah, don't worry. We'll get it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the tour.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Amazing selection.